The use of literature as a medical treatment dates back to antiquity. In ancient Greece and Egypt, libraries functioned as spiritual infirmaries, with their entrances bearing a specific clinical promise: the healing place of the soul. This practice was formalized in the early 20th century to address the specific psychological trauma of World War I. Doctors and librarians partnered to prescribe reading materials to veterans in hospital wards, aiming to help them process the horrors of the trenches. Modern bibliotherapy operates on two distinct tracks. Developmental bibliotherapy is used in educational settings for normative stressors like moving or family changes, while clinical bibliotherapy is a targeted intervention for severe emotional and behavioral disorders. This 2002 research paper by Lisa Ludwig provides a comprehensive review of the practice, synthesizing decades of clinical data to determine if the intervention actually yields measurable results. When we look at large-scale meta-analyses, such as the 1995 study by Mars, we find a contradiction. A meta-analysis combines the results of multiple scientific studies to identify overall trends. While Mars found a moderate overall efficacy, data from individual trials is wildly inconsistent, showing high success in some populations and zero impact in others. This discrepancy reveals the core reality of the practice. Assigning a piece of literature to a child is not inherently curative. The text itself does not heal. Bibliotherapy functions strictly as a tool for emotional displacement. Its statistical success depends entirely on the structural follow-up provided by the facilitator after the book is closed. To understand why the text alone fails, we must look at the psychological barriers in pediatric therapy. When a child is asked to directly confront trauma or abuse, they often deploy intense defensive barriers, shutting down or refusing to communicate with adults. Narrative intervention bypasses these defenses through a mechanism called displacement. Displacement is an unconscious defense mechanism where a person redirects a threatening emotion or impulse from its original source onto a safer, less threatening substitute. By utilizing a story, patients safely project real-world anxieties onto a fictional character. This proxy allows non-confrontational problem-solving, letting the child explore complex emotions from a distance, while returning a new vocabulary for those feelings back to the patient. For instance, gifted children frequently struggle with isolation and perfectionism. Displacement allows them to observe these traits in a character, facilitating self-reflection without the child feeling personally attacked or analyzed. In clinical settings, abused children can use characters to safely explore how to build relationships and trust. This allows them to examine these concepts without triggering the fear of punishment, often associated with their own lived experiences. Displacement succeeds by disarming the child's psychological tripwires. It turns fiction into a safe, objective testing ground, where reality can be analyzed without the threat of direct confrontation. Understanding the mechanism doesn't explain the inconsistent data. To find the why, we must look at specific clinical trials where displacement yielded measurable symptom reduction. Look at Schechtman's trials. Literature modeled alternative behaviors for students with emotional disorders, resulting in a significant reduction in aggression. We see similar success in Klingman's 1988 study on kindergarteners. The intervention targeted acute phobias, specifically fear of the dark, successfully reducing those symptoms. The success in the Klingman study was directly tied to the children's increased ability to use coping statements. They didn't just feel better, they had acquired the cognitive tools to manage the fear. This acquisition depends on dosage, the frequency and duration of the treatment. Robert Newhouse explored this in 1987 while studying general childhood fears. The data shows a stark threshold. Newhouse's initial 28-session protocol was a failure, yielding no measurable change. However, his expanded 56-session targeted protocol was verified as a success, reducing fear across the group. Narrative therapy is not an acute fix. It is a cumulative cognitive protocol that requires a sustained dosage to successfully rewire behavioral responses. If dosage and displacement are the primary drivers, why does bibliotherapy completely fail in certain environments? Identifying the boundary conditions of the therapy reveals the missing variable. On our dashboard, we plot null results. The Sipsa, Harman, and Beardsley studies failed to increase acceptance of disabled peers. Metrics remained flat. Similarly, Todal found bibliotherapy could not mature a child's understanding of death. These 3 failures share a specific, identifiable flaw. In Beardsley's protocol, the literature was delivered regularly, fulfilling the dosage requirement. However, the protocol was entirely passive. There was no active post-reading discussion. This clinical failure matches pedagogical research from the Dutch Program Council regarding language acquisition. They studied how children actually move from hearing a word to understanding a concept. Their findings differentiated between talking at a child and engaging in give-and-take conversation. Without that active exchange, the child does not perform the cognitive labor required to integrate new information. Passive reading cannot alter deeply rooted schemas. A structural, conversational feedback loop is the mandatory catalyst for any conceptual change. Practitioners must follow the therapeutic triad. First, targeted selection, choosing literature that mirrors the child's stressors. Second, mediated reading, delivering the narrative to establish safe displacement. Third, guided discussion, a Socratic give and take forcing the child to articulate reactions, converting passive observation into active processing. Finally, the triad requires active extension. This takes the theoretical insights from the discussion and forces the child to practice them in a physical or social context. Shepard and Koberstein demonstrated this in 1989. They didn't just read stories about sharing to preschoolers. They incorporated active extension techniques to move the behavior from the page to the playroom. By using puppets to role-play the characters' choices, the children converted abstract concepts into concrete behavioral shifts. They moved from understanding sharing to practicing it. This structural requirement is universal. Whether the facilitator is a school psychologist, a classroom teacher, or a grandparent sharing cultural heritage, the mechanism remains the same. The story itself is merely the diagnostic substrate. It provides vocabulary and safe distance, but the actual psychological healing occurs entirely within the dialogue.